The Chinese Grand Prix gave us exactly what this 2026 field needed. A proper race with feel-good stories and absolute horror shows at the same time. Andrea Kimi Antonelli converted his historic pole into his first Grand Prix victory. Mercedes controlled the tempo at the front, and behind them the rest of the grid either made a huge step forward or completely fell apart. Let's go through the winners and losers from a spectacular Chinese Grand Prix, what it really means for the title fight, and who's already under serious pressure just 2 races into the season. If you enjoy no-nonsense F1 analysis, make sure you subscribe, leave a like, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our full breakdown of the next race in Japan. We have to start with the obvious. Andrea Kimi Antonelli is not just the youngest pole sitter in Formula One history anymore, he's now a Grand Prix winner. On only his second weekend with a truly championship-caliber Mercedes, he delivered exactly what Toto Wolff was gambling on when he promoted Antonelli a year earlier than most people thought was sensible. This wasn't some lucky safety car win. Antonelli had to manage the entire rhythm of the race, defend at the start, absorb pressure from Lewis Hamilton, control tyre life, and still keep enough pace in hand to survive a late mistake. Those final laps were brutal to watch. His late off at the hairpin will end up in every highlight reel, and you could almost feel his dad, Marco Antonelli, aging 10 years on the pit wall. But he held on to it, brought the car back under control, and finished the job. The emotional side matters here too. Teenage tears on the podium, with Lewis Hamilton standing next to him, literally passing the baton from Mercedes legend to Mercedes future. For Toto Wolff, this is vindication. He backed Antonelli early through an up-and-down debut season, and now he has a teenager winning Grand Prix in a car that can fight for a championship. Antonelli is absolutely one of the big winners of this weekend, and so is his boss. On the other side of the spectrum, you have McLaren, and it's hard to overstate how bad this has been. 2 rounds into their title defense, they've managed to get just 1 car to the grid at each Grand Prix. In Melbourne, Oscar Piastri didn't even make the start after going off on the reconnaissance lap. In China, both Piastri and Lando Norris were taken out by separate electrical issues linked to their Mercedes power units. The pattern is obvious. McLaren are grappling with the way they're running their customer engines. That's a huge red flag when we already know that customer teams are struggling to get the same energy deployment as the works Mercedes. There will be a serious inquest at Mercedes HPP in Brixworth to understand whether this is a hardware problem or something McLaren are doing with their own operation and cooling. Either way, a double DNS when you finally look competitive again on a circuit that's less brutal for energy harvesting is a catastrophe. This is not how you defend a title. Right now, McLaren are firmly in the losers column.
While established big teams are tripping over themselves, Oliver Bearman and Haas are quietly having a dream start to 2026. After an honourable mention for Australia, China was the weekend where Bearman had to be called what he really is, one of the standout performers of this grid. He came out on top of a chaotic midfield fight that included his teammate Esteban Ocon, both Alpines, and a rotating cast of Red Bull-affiliated drivers. He was also lucky to avoid what he called a monster crash when Isaac Hadjar spun right in front of him in a pirouette, but you still have to survive those moments and then put in the laps afterwards, and that's exactly what he did. Clear the traffic, then bang in 40 rapid laps to secure P5. The reward is massive. Haas are now 4th in the constructors' standings, just 1 point behind McLaren and 5 clear of Red Bull. Nobody had that on their bingo card for the start of 2026. Right now, Bearman and Haas are not just nice stories, they're genuine winners of this early season.
If McLaren's problem is getting to the grid, Red Bull's problem is just about everything else. We've seen them have bad weekends before, last year's Hungarian Grand Prix for example, but the RB22 in China looked openly hostile to its drivers. Max Verstappen wrestled the car to 8th in qualifying, just ahead of Isaac Hadjar. That already tells you how far they've fallen. Nearly a second away from pole, while Mercedes and Ferrari fight for the front. Then, in the race, it got worse. Another terrible start dumped Verstappen at the back of the field. He was actually putting together a decent recovery drive, considering how poor the RB22's tyre management looks. And then a cooling problem on the energy recovery system killed his afternoon completely. Hadjar, for his part, survived that spin in front of Bearman, but he summed up their situation perfectly when he was asked about the cancelled races in Bahrain and Saudi Arabia. His answer: less points lost to everyone else. When your own driver is saying that out loud, you know the situation is bad. Of the 4 top teams on paper, Red Bull are the ones who most desperately need a big upgrade package, and they need it sooner rather than later. Miami would be a good time to start. Back at the sharp end of the grid, Lewis Hamilton walks away from Shanghai as one of the big winners too. Mother's Day in the UK, his mum in the paddock, and finally a long overdue Grand Prix podium with Ferrari. What stands out is not just the result, but the body language. Hamilton looks like a different driver compared to the end of his time at Mercedes. The way he attacks the start, how he races Charles Leclerc fairly but hard, how he engages with the team and the media. He looks like a 7-time world champion who's had a weight lifted off his shoulders. This new generation of cars clearly suits him, and that is a huge positive both for Ferrari and for Formula One in general. As his former race engineer Pete Bonington once put it, there's life in the old dog yet. Shanghai was probably the most convincing evidence of that so far. Then you have Aston Martin, and the word disappointing is starting to feel too soft. When Cadillac came into F1, its modest goal was simply to be respectable, even if that meant racing on its own at the back during its first season. With all due respect, Cadillac weren't expecting to be racing Aston Martin straight away, but that's exactly where we are. China was never going to magically fix everything after a miserable Melbourne, but the important thing is that there are very few signs of progress. Lance Stroll retired early, Fernando Alonso had to stop driving because the engine vibrations were shaking him and the car to pieces. Aston and Honda are now in firefighting mode, trying to get more robust fixes in place before Japan, Honda's home race, turns into a national embarrassment. In a strange way, the cancellations of Bahrain and Jeddah might actually be a small blessing for them. That gap gives Aston more time to dig into its problems without the pressure of back-to-back race weekends. But let's be blunt, right now, Aston Martin belongs firmly in the losers category.
Quietly, Alpine probably had one of its most encouraging weekends in a long time. They openly admitted they did a poor job in Melbourne getting the most out of their Mercedes power units, but race 1 of a new rule set with tricky energy management always had caveats. Shanghai, with less brutal demands on harvesting and deployment, allowed them to show their true baseline a bit more. Pierre Gasly had to give up 5th to Bearman, but once the race settled, he was otherwise unchallenged for P6 after a very intense opening scrap. On the other side of the garage, Franco Colapinto finally picked up a point for Alpine, despite starting on hard tyres and getting absolutely punished by the early safety car. From there, he delivered arguably his best performance in blue and pink, robust defensive driving, managing the tyres, and finally taking his first point in over a year. For a team that has essentially written off 2025 to focus on this new cycle, this was the kind of weekend they absolutely needed. Alpine go into Japan firmly in the winners column.
Finally, we have Williams, and it's not a pretty picture. Carlos Sainz salvaged P9 with a medium to hard strategy just before the early safety car, which allowed him to jump the likes of Colapinto, Hülkenberg and Arvid Lindblad. But beyond that, China didn't offer much to be optimistic about. Alex Albon didn't even make the start because of a hydraulics issue, and across both qualifying sessions, their highest grid position was 17th. Yes, the FW48 is overweight, but that's not the only problem. It's also down on aero load and proving very difficult to balance and set up properly for different track conditions. If Aston Martin weren't quite so catastrophic, Williams would probably be the clear disappointment of the season so far. They now need to pull off a proper mid-season development push just to get back to the fringes of the midfield. And that's something they simply haven't done for a long time, largely by choice. Right now, Williams are drifting, and that puts them clearly on the losers' side of China. So, from a spectacular Chinese Grand Prix, our key winners and losers are: winners, Antonelli and Toto Wolff, Oliver Bearman and Haas, Lewis Hamilton and Ferrari, Alpine and Colapinto. Losers, McLaren's title defense, Red Bull and the RB22, Aston Martin's supposed super team project, and a Williams organization that's slipping behind on every front. Let me know in the comments who you would add to each list. Did someone impress you more than Antonelli or Bearman? And which situation worries you more? Red Bull's performance, McLaren's reliability, or Aston Martin's complete lack of progress? If you enjoyed this breakdown, subscribe for more detailed F1 analysis, drop a like to help this video reach more fans, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our deep dive after the Japanese Grand Prix. See you in the next one.